Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. This is part 7 of What If Deku Had Green Lightning. If you guys enjoy this what if and want to see part 8 of it, comment down below and let me know. And go ahead and check out other what ifs in the channel. Before we start, please do support for more awesome content. Don't forget to subscribe and leave a like, and also share this video with your friends. So let's start this video. I hope you have all been studying properly. If you pass, you can go on the training camp trip during the summer holidays. After he left the room, pandemonium exploded. Man, I haven't studied at all. Kaminari complained. Yeah. Mina said, looking equally downcast. As UA students, it is imperative that you keep up with your studies. Ida scolded them, being third in the class from midterms. Yorozu nodded in agreement, having had been second. If you would like, I can help you assist with your studies. Ida nodded in agreement, saying that he and the other members of the top 5 in the class would assist with studying. Bakugo broke out in laughter, before settling on a smirk. I'll help study alright, but it'll be fucking intense. You shitty little lecturers will need it. Several members of the class sweat dropped before he started screaming, oh it could be fucking worse, you dunces. Izuku could be running your studies. Izuku sighed, being number 1 in the class, and his brother coming in 4th, was for several reasons, before he buried himself back in the English notes he had taken from the day. Everyone turned to look at the shy boy, before looking to Bakugo with a look of disbelief. Alright fine, no one of you fuckers believe me. Oh I nerd. Give him that fucking book. Izuku just rolled his eyes, before handing it over, absently-mindedly tapping his fingers on the desk. 3D printer. You were second, behind this fucking nerd. Surely you can understand this. Bakugo yelled, aggressively shoving the book towards her. She blinked and took it, before opening it and her eyes whitening quickly. She quickly tried to find some comparison in her own notes before closing the book and handing it back. Little nerd's quirk can double as an intelligence boost. Bakugo screamed, before whacking his Izuku on the head and continuing, so go fucking ahead, and get the little shit to tutor you, if you really want to. Izuku had stopped paying attention, and was on his phone, texting Mario, who had decided to be generous, and sent some information regarding exams in the past. Robots huh, I doubt it. It'll probably be something different, like. Izuku's eyes went wide with realization as he thanked Mario for the information, before texting Nejire, much to his embarrassment, to ask if she could help him with some ideas of his, as they had similar quirks, at least in terms of when being emitted, and she was ecstatic to help. His attention was drawn back to the present, when Todoroki tapped his shoulder. I would like to do better than 5th for the final exams. Would you mind giving me some basic tutoring? Todoroki asked, before Sero added something on. Yeah, could you help all of us, man? Even if it's only a little, I reckon your help with anything from combat to heroics to general studies would help greatly. Sure, I'd be happy to. Izuku said, running some ideas through his mind for his time usage. He figured if he completely applied himself, he'd manage to help tutor his classmates whilst keeping on top of all his own studies and training. Izuku followed his classmates out to lunch, where they split up to their own respective friendship groups. Izuku went off to meet with the big 3 in the cafeteria, all of them sitting together. Izuku was just making general discussion with them, talking a variety of topics, from studies to hobbies, generally getting to know each other better. Izuku was about to start saying something when an elbow hit the back of his head, resulting in him jumping slightly and holding the back of his head in pain. Oh. My bad. I managed to not see your massive head. Monoma from class 1B told Izuku, who was more than a little dumbfounded, your massive class 1 ego must ha. Hey. That's not cool. Nejire cut him off. Oh, the famous big 3. Where are you hanging out with this class 1 a loser? Why don't you come over to the bed? He was cut off by a large tentacle hitting him backwards, which quickly retracted. Izuku, Nejire and Mario all looked at Tamaki in shock, before Mario clapped the now panicking boy on the back, whilst Monoma was looking over in shock. He was about to start again before a hand chopped his neck, and a girl with orange hair caught the irritating blonde by their collar. Sorry about Monoma. He managed to escape from our views. Hope he didn't bother you guys too much. Kendo said before bowing slightly, leaving the slightly shell-shocked friends. They held a silence briefly, looking at each other before continuing like nothing happened. Finally came the end of the day, and Izuku, now in his dorms, had drawn up a daily schedule until exams. He would spend about an hour after school working with Nejire, who was free for that time, before helping his classmates study until about dinner, around 7. After finishing dinner at 7:30 p.m., he would spend several hours in his own intensive studying regime, before spending some time training and doing some additional quirk advancement that wouldn't be safe to do with Nejire, before sleeping around 1. Okay look, he was the kind of person that didn't feel tired, even if he should. That aside, there was also a weekend before the exams that he could spend studying. He knew he was meant to be part of the group study after lunch, and Nejire was free to work during the morning, so he could spend time then working with her, before the group study. then going to train and develop individually for a while, before making something to eat in the dorm kitchen, and going to do intensive study for a while. Heading outside, he met Nejire at one of the school fields, where the two made light conversation whilst doing some basic stretches, led by Nejire. So, because we're going to be using our arms, we'll focus on some stretches from them. Yeah. Alright, let's go. She pumped the two of them up, punching the air before leading the stretches. Basic arm stretches and a variety of shoulder stretches. Eventually they finished stretching, and began working on directional shots. So, when I first started using my quirk, I found that my shots were really unpredictable and chaotic in general, and there were more than a few people making some comparison between me and my quirk, which is totally fair by the way. I 100% agree, and whilst there's more to both, it's a baseline. Anyway, where was I? Right. Targeting shots. Try visualizing a shape or flow for your quirk to follow once fired. Nejire explained, before opening her palm and firing a shot. Izuku watched in awe as it went straight up, before gently floating down like a feather. Almost on instinct, he pulled out a notebook and flipped to the page on Nejire's quirk, adding some additional notes and drawings. Nejire only managed to get a brief peek at the book, but there were things on her quirk she didn't even know. She shook her head before stepping back from Izuku, so he could try and manipulate a shot from his quirk. Izuku took a deep breath, and looked up. Visualize the shot, the path it will follow. He repeated it like a mantra as he raised both arms, connecting at the palms and hands cupped. He breathed out, gathering energy in his arms, both having lightning arcing off of them as he fired a shot. He watched in mild disappointment as he just fired a lightning bolt upwards in a vaguely straight line, but there was less additional arcing than normal. He turned his head to Nejire, who was eagerly clapping. You did good for a first try. Remember, I'm a third year at the top of the school. This is your first year at UA. Right. Yeah. Anyway, can you control the speed of your lightning? Nejire asked, bouncing slightly from side to side as she leaned towards Izuku. Izuku blushed slightly, before answering, maybe. Try slowing it down then, and focus on a shape. Trajectory first, speed second, power third, yeah. Like for my quirk, I have to fire it slowly, to get the former and latter, as faster shots are harder to control, and have less impact. You gotta find the right balance for your quirk. So just give it your best shot. Izuku nodded, pulling out a notebook and writing some things down. He nodded to her, that he would try again, and she beamed at him as she stepped backwards. Izuku repeated the actions from before, trying to calm his nerves as he breathed out. Slow it down, and follow the path. Izuku concentrated, relaxing slightly as he pictured a fish, gently flowing down a stream at a steady pace. It helped him, as he fired the lightning. This time as he fired it, it did not stray from the path, and, although it traveled slowly, and was very thin, it made it high up before Izuku lowered his arms. It took a fair bit of effort, but he was pleased and smiled over to Nejire, who was bouncing excitedly. Hey. Good job, Izuku. I think we'll leave it there as I need to go study as well. We can work on a stronger strike tomorrow. Nejire said, smiling as the two began walking back to the dorms. They were still on school campus, but because of where they were it was about a 15-minute walk back. Izuku nodded before bowing deeply. Thank you for all your help. If there's anything I can do to rep. Oh, it's fine, you're one of my best friends, Izuku. Nejire said. Izuku blushed slightly and was still bowing, so he didn't quite get Nejire's brief look of ever so slight discontentment, but the two continued making brief conversation before he arrived at his own dorms. He waved to Nejire, who was waving rapidly as she floated away slightly. Opening the door to the dorms, he found the rest of the class had already started their study session. He apologized for being late, to which they just shrugged, as he ran up to grab his study material. Bringing down a couple study books, some that he had especially made for group study sessions that didn't have the extreme depth that his own ones did, but would still be more than enough to pass with a decent margin. He took a seat between Sero and Jiro. They were about the middle of the class, so they didn't need excessive amounts of help, but they also didn't have the same drive. Some that were just not quite at the top had to make that bonus smile. They were both thankful for the additional help that they weren't otherwise getting. The two of them were doing some revision over maths from the year so far, and were having a little trouble with understanding some of the proofs. Opening his notebook, he did his best to explain it in a simplified fashion, making sure not to accelerate his speech, mostly because the one time he accidentally did Bakugo screamed, "Stop making the fucking extras feel dumber. That's my job, you shitty nerd," at him. By the end of the session, the two had completely understood the proofs in question, and learned some new methods to finding other proofs. Izuku was pretty satisfied with this as they all sat down to eat dinner together. After dinner he helped clean up briefly, before excusing himself to go to his room, and begin setting up study time. His plan was to do maths tonight, Japanese and English over the weekend, being much more to study, science on Monday, and modern hero art history on Tuesday. Midnight had a unique subject to teach, but no one really cared, it was an easy subject. And spend the Wednesday, and of the written exam period, doing further preparation for the physical exam Thursday. Then Friday was only home group for the class, to recap the exams, after they had all been graded and such. Regardless, it was 8, and he was planning to study for about 5 hours straight, assuming he remembered to go to sleep later. Regardless, he cleared his desk and set up the 2 fold-away tables he had prepared for studying. Once all set up, he had 3 tables, forming a rectangle with a side missing. Next, he pulled out the many maths notebooks he had filled up throughout the year, and had each open on the tables, with a few otherwise empty spots filled with graph pads, so he could go over all the proofs and problems again, along with any other general rules of mathematics he may come across. About 3 hours later, if you were to enter Izuku's room, the first thing you would notice is the constant green lightning flashing off of him as he studied. The next thing would be the 3 desks, and how he was onto the second one, the first one covered in dozens of empty pens and pages covered in a variety of notes, equations and proofs. That is, if you were to enter his room. No one came in the first place. He was fairly quiet with his quirk, unless he were to fire it. Furthermore, his door was locked, and the only person who might come in was Bakugo. But wouldn't dare enter after last time he entered during one of Izuku's study sessions. He was constantly shocked accidentally from just looking at the notes, and also getting in Izuku's way. Regardless, he continued without breaks of any sort until he finished the last of his notes. He didn't bother checking the time as he silently showered, getting changed and putting away all his notes from the day. He had put it all stacked in a specific spot for his finished notes, before pulling out his mattress and preparing it to sleep as he released the last remnants of his quirk, collapsing and ready to pass out in the sweet embrace of sleep. For apparently only 5 hours, as his alarm went off and he shot up. He began charging his quirk and shot a text to Nejire to confirm they were still doing the training. She said yep, and that they would work on more complex shots today, as he changed into some exercise clothes and ran downstairs to grab a light breakfast and greeted Iida and Todoroki as they came down before heading out to meet Nejire. Together the two of them worked on shaping Izuku's shots, and his day followed much like yesterday after school, just more. Much more. The court training went for several hours instead, same with the group study session, but his personal study session went for close to 10 hours. It was very early in the morning by the time he was finished. The week went on a lot like this, until Tuesday. He had developed his ranged shots to be about twice his own speed, about 50 meters before lightning would begin arsing randomly while still following the primary path, and would be effectively establishing a connection for him to keep attacking. Effectively like when he sends it through the ground but without resistance. Overall, just better with more options. He found he was ahead of schedule, and prepared to do broad studies with literally all his notes gathered on his desks as he began studying. About half an hour in, he heard someone yell from outside. "Hey Izuku. What you doing?" But didn't really register it as he kept studying. He vaguely heard Bakugo yell something about good luck getting to the shitty little nerd, before there was a loud slam, but Izuku wasn't really paying attention as he threw another empty pen away, before a tap on his shoulder broke him out of it. And so he did the appropriate thing. He screamed. "Whoa, chill dude. I just wanted to check on you. You haven't been responding to your phone until like 2 AM, which is not healthy for a number of reasons. I just figured out why though. Dude, you haven't been taking any breaks, have you? And look at this material. You don't cover this stuff at all during UA. Like, kid, seriously, take a break." Mirio scolded Izuku. The green-haired boy just laughed nervously before Mirio grabbed Izuku and began dragging him out. "Where are you taking me?" Izuku asked, trying and failing to escape. "Me? Oh, I'm not taking you anywhere. I'm the only here to get you out of here, cause your door is locked," Mirio explained, unclicking the door and practically throwing Izuku out. "It's about where she's going to take you." Izuku suddenly had a pair of arms wrapped around his waist, trapping his own arms at the side. He saw a strand of periwinkle blue hair, and was oblivious to Bakugo and Yuirozu working to create a special padlock Izuku hopefully couldn't break into without their knowledge. "Nejire. Right? I'm taking you somewhere that doesn't involve work because you need a break," she proclaimed, as she stood upright while still holding his arm, ignoring the scheming going on in the background. She proceeded to drag him straight downstairs, past the rest of the class who were eating dinner, and outside to a different part of the UA campus. Izuku was reaching new levels of red, even more so when he heard Mina yell "I ship it" from the dining room. "Did you even eat dinner?" Nejire asked, with a look on her face that said she knew. Izuku failed to form a coherent word, opting to shake his head instead. She whacked him on said head, hard. "Idiot. Right. I'm not surprised, so I've got some food you can eat once we get there," she scolded, continuing to drag him. Izuku could only nod again, his face still a deep red, probably creating a more significant solid color change than Mina's quirk. Once they finally got to the spot, it was a lake with a small clearing and waterfall. "Wow, UA has funds for everything, huh?" Izuku asked, now able to speak again, despite the red tint his face still had, and was that really necessary? Nejire's face flushed in turn, much to Izuku's worry. "Hey, are you okay? Your face is really red," he stated, leaning over. Nejire nodded, but her face went redder when Izuku pressed the back of his hand to her forehead. It seems like you have a slight fever. Where's the food? I'll bring it over and you can No, it's fine. I don't have a fever, it's, a side effect of my quirk. Yeah. Anyway, you meant to be the one relaxing and maybe catching up on some rest after sleeping for like 5 hours a night for the past 4 days. Nejire diverted the subject, still red as she searched for where she put the basket. Izuku just nodded, the concern never leaving his eyes as he looked around. Why does UA even have this? Izuku asked, to which Nejire just shrugged. Well, the others don't know where this is so we won't be bothered, hopefully, she muttered. Izuku raised an eyebrow to that, but didn't bother following up on it, as she laid out the picnic blanket, and the two sat opposite each other. Nejire pulled out 2 bento boxes, handing one to Izuku. Oh, TT, thank you, Nejire. Izuku managed to stammer out, looking at the ground as she giggled a little. It's nothing, Izuku, you're special to me, and I think you need this for a break. Like, no one in the school has ever even studied half the amount of time you have, nor as in depth, so chill a little. Nejire told him, placing a hand on top of his. Izuku looked up at her and smiled, despite his own blush. Thank you. Anyway, enough talking, I wanna eat. Nejire said, beaming at him as she watched him open the box. Izuku nodded and tried some of the chicken. It's really good. Izuku said, causing Nejire to blush slightly. Thank you. Are you sure you don't have a fever? You seem to be red low. It's nothing. Anyway, how are you going? Nejire asked, diverting the subject again. The two engaged in light small talk, the setting sun a backdrop for their meal as they sat side by side, watching the calm water. It was silence, sure, but a comfortable silence. Izuku vaguely felt himself nodding off as he breathed out in contentment. Nejire was blushing a lot, she felt Izuku leaning against her shoulder. She yawned herself, the work the two had done that day had tired herself out as well, and somehow the junior student was still energetic by the end of it. They both were trying to compress attacks as much as possible, to try and make much stronger attacks. She yawned again, leaning against Izuku's head, not failing to notice the fluffiness of his hair. Nejire was asleep moments before the sun dipped below the horizon, equally content as the green-haired boy next to her. Aizawa was observant, unsurprisingly. Being an underground hero helped a lot with that. Regardless, he was checking the location of some students when he noticed one missing from the map of the dorm. As part of helping to keep track of students, they always had to keep their ID cards with them, with each ID card having a built-in GPS space tracker. Clicking on the application's option to find the green-haired problem child's tracker, he found it somewhere deep in UA's campus. Well, he's safe at least. Aizawa thought, before taking a second look. There was a second dot there too. The periwinkle-haired problem child. He sighed deeply before thinking for a moment. The school has no relationship policy, and personally I don't care as long as it doesn't cause their grades to drop. I don't think Izuku's grade dropping is even a problem. If anything, the kid probably could use that to be able to take a break. And if anything, Nejire would end up doing better with someone with such a dedicated mind, and Izuku could almost definitely use the confidence. Aizawa thought, sighing again. He knew Izuku had slept less than himself over the past few days, and probably had been studying to a stupid degree for an unhealthy amount of time. He'd make sure to wake the kids up around 7 tomorrow. For now, he'd leave the 2B. True to his word, Aizawa did make sure the 2 students were woken up at around 7. Although, he did not wake them up per se. No, he was still sleeping at 7, come on, this is Aizawa we're talking about. Instead, he sent his husband to do so, who, for whatever hellish reason, woke up at the crack of dawn. So that also served as his own alarm clock, and most of the schools, hearing the very, very loud yeah. At 7 exactly. Only 4 people would know that it was dedicated for 2 students in particular. Nejire and Izuku both shot up at the teacher's exclamation, who was by now, chuckling as he walked away, muttering, "Oh young love," under his breath. The two turned to look at each other, noses barely inches away from the others, as they both developed heavy blushes and shuffled away. "I'm so sorry, Nejire," Izuku said, looking down, a red tint that had a stronger color than his hair. "No, it's my fault, sorry Izuku," Nejire replied, also looking down with an equally strong blush. "Well, if it makes you feel any better, I had fun last night, and even though it ended differently, that was enjoyable too," Izuku said, blushing harder and smiling slightly as he gently placed a hand on hers. Nejire's blush somehow became more than Izuku's new one, as she stared at him, mouth agape. "Did I say something wrong?" Izuku said, pulling his hand back, and waving it in front of Nejire's face. "I'm so sore." He was broken off by a tight hug from Nejire, who was blushing ever so slightly less. "You said just the right thing," she told him, before breaking off. The two were both blushing messes, but were content as they packed up and started walking back towards the dorms. "We should do this again sometime," Nejire said excitedly, back to her normal self. Izuku had a shaky smile, before nodding. They gave each other a final farewell as they passed Izuku's dorm, where he proceeded to jump straight to his balcony and clean up the notes from yesterday as quick as possible, whilst effectively ironing a shirt using his quirk. He quickly grabbed his stationery as he tried to open his door, only to find it wouldn't. He blinked once, before opting to jump back out the window, and walking through the dorm's front door. He was the last one to make it to breakfast, even if he was the first to finish. Izuku whacked Bakugo on the head for not unlocking the door, who claimed that Nejire had the key, and it wasn't his fault. Izuku whacked Bakugo again, telling him to find a solution for it before the end of the day. Maybe his adoptive mother had left a bigger impact than she might realize, but that was beside the point. It was slightly the embarrassment of the morning. Izuku quickly ate and left, leaving most of the class in shock, pun intended, before they shrugged and carried on eating. Izuku had made it to class, doing some last-minute revision. Coincidentally, he had gotten remarkably faster, probably at a speed only beaten by All Might and Hawks. He had also improved how fast he could make his mind interpret. He might not be smarter, but he'd reach a conclusion faster. And so he could study fast. Like, stupid fast. Like, his eyes would become effectively straight green lines as he read across a page, turning before someone else would be able to read the first 2 sentences. Aizawa-sensei was the only other person in the room at the moment who was writing some items on the chalkboard. Izuku thought for a moment, before going up to his ever-tired teacher and asking a few questions. Aizawa-sensei. The teacher grunted and tilted his head, signaling for the green-haired boy to continue. Are there any rules regarding quirk usage during the written exams? Aizawa-sensei thought for a moment, before answering. There are no explicit rules against it, and students in other courses can use intelligence quirks, so as long as you are not directly going against rules, so you couldn't use a quirk like Yairozu's to make a calculator or dictionary, but a quirk like yours to boost your intelligence. Besides, I have a feeling you'll need it, problem child. Izuku nodded in response, more than a little worried about the latter statement. He sat down and began going through some modified meditation exercises. After lots of experimentation, he found that this was the most effective way to charge his quirk, the calmness of mind, in a variety of imagery that typically depicted some kind of electrical current or lightning. Also, it tended to trigger some of the aesthetic portions of his quirk, but most notably his body heats up dramatically, the current flowing causing friction. Thankfully though, it wasn't hot enough to cause damage. Regardless, he let himself get lost in the exercises before being brought back to reality by the school's bell. No one had bothered him, everyone too lost in their own variations of last-minute studies, whilst they waited for the first test to begin. English. It was fairly straightforward. There was a comprehension section, grammar, a few spelling sections and a written section, all in all totaling to 90 minutes worth of examination. Izuku was the first to finish, technically, but the last to hand his paper up. President Mick nodded happily before leaving the room for their next teacher to come in, Midnight, who handed out her exams. This had content regarding some art history, along with the ways it could be applied to heroics nowadays. It was fairly easy, as the same as last time happened again. Midnight bade farewell to the class, as they left for their first break of the day. There were still 3 more exams to go, 2 of them being 2-hour exams. Man, I feel like I did awful. Kaminari whined, before Mina picked up where he left off. Well, at least I left nothing unanswered. Thanks to all your tutoring guys. Mina said, pointing at Iida, Izuku, and Yairozu. Iida started spouting something about the duty of a UA student, Izuku turned into a blushing mess, and Yairozu beamed at them. Bakugo rolled his eyes at their behavior as Kirishima dragged him off somewhere, probably for their break. Eventually Izuku compassed himself, but remained in the classroom. He opted to listen to some music as the remaining few of the class filed out, whilst he pulled a notebook out of his back pocket. This was the one on his own quirk. As weird as it was almost meditative, working on and producing theories about, well, himself. He was doing a detailed drawing of an idea for a defense. At this point, he had figured out most segments of this move, there was only a little bit left to do. He needed to name it, test it, but also needed to do a bunch more maths regarding the strength of the move. Similar to his discharge however, he was probably going to have a variety of intensities from 1 to 10, 10 being the strongest, and 1 being the weakest. Should also name my power-up move I'll get around to it, when I get around to it I suppose. Izuku focused himself to the drawing, what ended up looking like a slightly curved web. Looking carefully though, you would be able to see a slightly denser point, presumably the point of origin, and rather than the careful finesse of a spider. This had the jagged randomness that nature embedded within items, such as the nature of entropy. Eventually the break finished, and the rest of the students returned to their seats, waiting in tense anticipation for the next exam. In came their Japanese teacher, who handed out the exams. Again, the same as the previous exams repeated, before in came the science teacher. Their science teacher handed out the exams personally, patting Izuku on his head as they went. Izuku shrugged off the weird gesture, until he took a look at the test. He felt a little lightheaded as he raised his hand. "Sensei, is this the right test?" Izuku asked, sweating slightly. The teacher just nodded, and Izuku felt more than a little worried. May I have some more paper and a couple extra pens? The teacher simply complied whilst the class ignored Izuku's weird behavior. No one of this was covered. I think I studied some of this during my sessions, but it looks like I'll have to rearrange the formulas like all the formulas. Izuku thought nervously, using his quirk to write down and rearrange the various science formulas he may need. He made it to the first question, and pushed his quirk-powered brain to the max. He was given 3 variables of a formula that needed 6, and it would only give 1 variable of 3 he would need to get a particular answer. This is going to be a very, very long 2 hours. Everyone else had finished and were watching Izuku with piqued interest, who had gone through 2 of the pens, and with his quirk was moving faster than any of them could easily identify. His eyes were bright green, going in all directions as his quirk lightly sparked off his shoulders. He had barely finished the final question, although it was in his style, so no stone left unturned, and considering the amount of times he had second-guessed himself, ended up leaving permanent dents in the page, no matter how hard he had tried to erase it, by the end of the 2 hours. They had a break now for lunch, and Izuku felt so beyond dead at this point. Ignoring the curious gazes from his classmates, he walked out the door, got something relatively plain and light from lunch rush, and sighed as he sat down at the table. The big 3 noticed Izuku being fairly somber, walking over. Nejire sat down next to him as Tamaki and Mirio sat across from him. "Dude, are you alright?" Mirio spoke first, as Izuku remained unfazed by Nejire's constant poking. Izuku's response was to let out a pained groan, poking at the plain rice. Mirio looked at Tamaki, both with worry evident in their gazes, whilst Nejire was contemplating shaking him when Izuku spoke up. "Did you guys ever have to do the proof for like, atomic and molecular compaction, and the way atoms vibrate within a solid object?" The 3 third-year students blinked. "The what?" Mirio asked. Izuku responded by pushing his tray forward slightly, and slamming his head down on the table. Hard. The other cafeteria occupants did not question the loud noise. It was the day of written exams after all. Most were feeling something similar, and it was a pretty good representation of the school's mood. Nejire gently rubbed Izuku's back in an attempt to comfort the boy, whilst Tamaki was looking up what he was talking about on his phone. Mirio pushed Izuku's food back to him as he started eating his own lunch, whilst Tamaki's lunch looked more like a platter. Nejire started eating her own food too, as Izuku forced himself to sit up, and finished off the last of his rice. Izuku let out a sigh as he listened to his friends engage in light conversation, so mentally exhausted that he was just incapable of social interaction. With no warning, another loud slam resonated from Izuku's head colliding with the table. "Dude, you should probably stop doing that," Mirio told him. "If science was like that, what'll maths be like?" Izuku whined. The members of the big 3 looked at each other with concern, before Nejire spoke up again. "Izuku," she whined, to get his attention. Izuku just grunted in response, acknowledging her and gesturing for her to continue. "After school, do you want to just relax? Rather than torture yourself with whatever training regime you had planned?" I guess, boo." Izuku responded, a little confused whilst Tamaki and Mirio were looking at each other, a knowing look on their face. "Great. I'll text you after school about it." Nejire cut him off, beaming at the green-haired boy. Izuku smiled slightly, as he checked the time. Sorry, I need to go prepare for the next exam, see ya," he said, before speeding off. Nejire smiled at his exit location, the 2 boys opposite her chuckling slightly. "Hey Nejire, you gonna speed things up now?" Mirio asked teasingly. Nejire blushed, before glaring angrily at him. "It's not like you're doing any better." Mirio, uncharacteristically, blushed whilst Tamaki looked on in confusion. "That's what I thought," Nejire yelled, before they left to their own final written exam. Izuku looked at the test paper, before asking ectoplasm for several more sheets of paper, and at least 3 more pens and 2 pencils. This was going to be the longest 2 hours of his life. So far at least. Much like the science exam, he was the last to finish, attracting curious gazes from his classmates as he barely finished in time. Ectoplasm, much like the science teacher, patted a boy's head as he gathered the exams, dismissing the class for the end of the day as he carried the stack of paper from the classroom. Much like lunch, Izuku's head met table. "So it was you doing that lunch? Dude, are you okay?" Kaminari asked, trying to forget the horrors of the exams. Izuku just groaned, before Bakugo whacked his head. Shitty little nerd got overwhelmed by the exams like the shitty little nerd he is. Bakugo teased, before dragging Izuku up by the arm. Whilst that was happening, Yoyorozu was looking at the scrap paper Izuku had used, fishing it out of the recycling with a pair of gloves. Did we have to use any of this in the exams?" she asked Bakugo, tapping the boy on his shoulder. "What the fuck is that even? Did we ever even look at any of that shit in class?" Bakugo screamed, whilst Iida scolded him for his poor language. "Look at this shit and you will understand 4 eyes." Iida continued to scold Bakugo for his explicit language, but still did as requested and looked at Izuku's notes. This appears to be an overly complex solution to question 1. Wasn't question 1, like, multiple choice though? And like, literally just circle the correct angle. Mina piped up. Whilst that is true, that is overly simplified, and not a befitting description for a UA student. Ida proclaimed, pointing at her as she continued. Mina just shrugged, before Izuku spoke. No, wasn't it too, using trigonometry and the quadratic formula, figure out the area of the triangle within the graph in terms of x? Izuku asked, sounding deader than Aizawa-sensei on a bad day. Izuku, I beg your pardon, but the quadratic formula. I do not believe we have done that. Ida replied, and many of the other top 5 students nodded in agreement. Izuku just sat back down on the chair, before slamming his head onto the table again. Man, that cannot be good for you, doing it so hard and for the 4th time today. Kirishima commented. Izuku just sighed, just sitting there whilst Bakugo pulled Izuku's phone out of his pocket. He unlocked it, before screaming into it, come pick your fucking boyfriend up. Class 1 looked at Izuku in confusion, who was a blushing mess, and trying to grab his phone back. Cock-chan, Izuku whined, as the explosive boy used his superior height to keep the phone out of his reach. He had no idea who Bakugo called, but he could hear an alright beat, but it's not like that. Before Bakugo hung up on them. Explain. Now. Mineta yelled at the green-haired boy. I don't have a girlfriend. Izuku tried to defend himself. Bakugo just chuckled, before adding a not fucking yet you don't. Izuku blushed heavily whilst Mina and Toru, the class's resident shippers, crowded and evilly cackling Bakugo, before the question answered itself. Izuku Nejire yelled as she entered the classroom. Mineta and Kaminari started drooling slightly as she grabbed Izuku's arm and dragged him away. The class went silent momentarily, before Mineta decided to make an interesting comment. Damn Izuku, never pegged you foe. He started, before Bakugo kicked the little twerp like a football straight into the chalkboard. Kaminari cringed before cowering as he realized Bakugo's killer gaze was directed at him. Everyone else quickly left the two perverts to their fate, their screams of terror echoing throughout the school. Meanwhile, Nejire had also developed a blush as she realized what she just did, but continued as she dragged Izuku to the 3A dorms. There were very few third-year hero students, and even fewer still in 3A, only herself, Tamaki and Mirio AN. I know canonically Mirio is in 3B, but this is just for my own sake, mostly thanks to Aizawa-sensei's strict expulsion policy. It happened mostly last year, as he had already expelled most of his own class, so he decided to thin the numbers in the other classes. Viciously. In any case, this meant the 3A dorms were fairly empty, so Nejire figured this would be the best place to take Izuku where they could relax. Hopefully he likes it. Nejire thought, as she forced Izuku to sit in the lounge room, while she grabbed some things from her room. Wait, when did he become so important to me? When did I decide this? Last night. Well, I guess fine, Mario's right, whatever, but would he like me to? Nejire continued her line of thought, pacing in her room. She suddenly stopped when she heard a knock in a voice. Nejire. Are you alright? It was Izuku, with genuine worry in his voice, not enough to seem like he distrusted her to look after herself, but enough to show his care. It made her heart flutter. Oh, I'm fine. I'll be out soon, go sit back down. Nejire called back, grabbing a few things from her dorm's fridge. She floated back downstairs, carrying several things as she made it to the kitchen. She tossed USB to Izuku, but clumsily caught it. It's some movies and TV shows, just plug it into the TV and choose some. Nejire told him, preparing a small platter of various snacks for the two of them. Yo? Can Tamaki and I turn this into a double daw? Mirio started, before being cut off by a powerful energy blast. Sorry about him, he's having trouble asking out his crush. Nejire said, sending a smug glare in Mirio's direction. Izuku just blinked, nodding in understanding as he turned back towards the TV and selecting one of the shows. Nejire came back out, with the snacks, the two contentedly snacking and occasionally commenting on the show they were watching. So it's a world without quirks, but with a giant yellow octopus as a teacher, right? Nejire commented as they finished the first episode. I mean, yeah, but it looks amazing. Izuku defended it. Nejire just giggled, before they started the next episode. They went on like this, before it came time for Izuku to return to his own dorms. Hey, thanks for this, it was just what I needed after today. Izuku told her. Well, I'm glad I could help, and good luck with the physical portion of the exams tomorrow. I'll be watching. Nejire told him, before pushing him out and closing the door. She giggled more as she heard his wail of anguish, as he sent him a text. DMs. Nejire and Izuku. Me? Tamaki and Mirio will be watching as well. Izuku. Oh. Okay then. Nejire giggled, before cleaning up and returning to her room. They had watched half a dozen episodes, and maybe they could watch the rest some other time. Together. Nejire daydreamed, floating slightly. Mirio and Tamaki were watching from afar, hands interlaced. Nejire, hurry up already. Mirio said, raising his left hand, much to Tamaki's extreme embarrassment. Nejire blushed and flew slightly faster, out of their sight. Izuku was even more stressed now, as he sighed. Bakugo did in fact give him a key, so he took off the weird lock. He cleaned up his room and pulled out the mattress, before collapsing. His mind was effectively mushed by the end of the day after the harder exams, and he wanted an answer about it. Unfortunately, it would have to wait until after tomorrow's exams. Sighing again, he let sleep overtake his body. Thanks for listening. I do hope you enjoyed. If you want a next part of this video, like, subscribe, and comment down below, and turn on that bell notification. And also check out the other videos that I have created, and enjoy. See you in the next video. Peace.